You got me 2 months in a row, so I'll apologize in advance. That's just the way it goes. Anyhow, what I'm going to do is turn a spindle, and then I'll demo the reeding tool on it. Or excuse me, the fluting tool. You can use it for reeds as well as flutes, but I've got it set up. Just have to use a different router bit. Essentially, is all you'd have to do. And this particular lathe, I took it home over the last week or two just to make sure I was familiar, because what I have at home is a 3520B Powermatic. The Powermatic has a 10-inch swing from this point to center, and this one has 5 inches. Okay, so this is a 10-inch swing total, but 5 inches from the base to the center. This essentially is what I'm going to make. That's what I practiced on a little bit. I'll hand it around. That shows the fluting in it. Okay? So, what I'll do is, like I said, turn a spindle, and then I'll get the reeding jig up here, and excuse me, the fluting jig up here, and run some flutes in it. And I'll show you a little bit more of what I got in mind there. When I turn a spindle like this, if it's going to have a square end to it, I like to put a little bit of masking tape on it, because when you cut into it, there's a tendency on the square to, let me see if I can get this straight, to splinter out. And using this masking tape holds it together a little bit so it doesn't tend to fray out or pop away so much. So that's what I'm using that for. So
is that light on there?
well, I know it isn't, as a matter of fact. Should be. Okay. Then I'm just going to bring it in around. Got it in the round. I might go ahead, if I was going to actually make a spindle that would have a foot on it, a leg in other words, I'd go ahead and put a parting edge on it right down here to make sure I had it exactly perpendicular to the body of this. I'll just go ahead and, so it's just an experimental piece. Just for design purposes. The way I would tend to do something. I would go ahead and start a design in which you're going to roll a bead. Sometimes a little bit. Got to find your edge. Ride your bevel. Bevel. To taper this to where I want to go. What I intend to do is then reduce this down a little bit, like a taper on the foot. So at this point, I've just made a little foot at this point, a little spindle. It's obviously not long enough to be a leg. I'm on too small a lathe for that. It would probably be more like 24 inches or whatever, depending on the height of the end table or whatever you're doing. But anyhow, this gets us roughly in the designation. Clamp it down a little bit. So now we've just got to the point where we've got just a little small leg, okay? So what I came up with is this. I found a couple scraps around the house of plywood and I bolted it to a 1/4 by 4 inch piece of cold roll steel. And I've got a little Bosch Colt small detail router, bolted that to it, drilled a 7/8 hole out in the center so that I can extend it in or out, okay? And what I did was to put a cam follower, or I call it a follower, on here, and it's just a piece of wood, 7/16 or a 1/2 inch thick by 2, just a piece of dowel rod, okay? Drilled a hole out in the center of it, 3/4, for the part to go through. This part was for my 10-inch swing on my Powermatic 8520B, for this demonstration on this smaller lathe, which has a 5-inch swing up to, from the base to the center point, is 5 inches. Okay, so I just reset some holes and all that. So, what you got to do, I looked into this lathe, got the instructions out on it, and it has indexing for 24 different slots. Okay, so there's 24 different holes in this headstock spindle that you can drop this pin into right here. Okay, in my case, because of the diameter of the piece that we're doing, I chose to do 6. So every 4 holes, if you will, indexing holes, I make the little mark here and a little mark on the headstock spindle. So what you do is just thread it in and lock it down in place. And then you come around here, a little bit noisy. And the key on this is that you've got to keep this flat across here, so it comes down in a parallel action. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start right at this edge right here, use that as my mark that away, and then when I get down here, I'm going to have the follower bump right against that. That's why I left that a little bit proud in this case. You could just as easily put marks along here or bolt a piece of wood to it just to have a stop, that it stops again. Okay, so here we go. There's one. Okay, very quick.
Pretty good technique.
Then you come over. Like I said, I marked them every 4 and just marked an alignment tool so it'd be easier to find it. And I put one hand here so I keep this flat on here as I move it around. And again, try to start it in the same location. Then reset my indexing. It's real simple to make. Like I said, there's really no trick to it. And about there. Run it down until the cam follower makes on this piece right here.
Your depth.
Piece right here.
Your depth.
Yes. I can cut as deep as I want within the range. In other words, I can open up this latch and I can come on in as deep as I want. It's just personal preference.
You just got to set down the bigger depth.
I do, exactly. I cut this can follower kind of so it would match and give me as much depth as I want, but I could also move the bit out a little bit more if I wanted to get a little bit more depth into it. Yeah. And if you're wanting to use it, again, on my 3520B, which has a lot more room for me to negotiate on here, you can use this on an urn-shaped item that has a lot more curve, right? Because you're only limited by your cam follower, you know, the distance here, where it'll hit, and depending on how big an arc you're making, this edge right here. Okay, as far as if you're coming up against something hard, I mean, this could be a hard stop here as well as this point, depending on what you're turning, right?
So-
I explained myself well?
You could make that piece of steel thinner than that, not as broad that way.
You could.
And
There's
then
a
it
lot
would
of
give
different
you-
things you can do,
It
yeah.
would give you a little more flexibility on the
However,
curve shape,
I doubt
right?
that.
That is correct, up to the point that I've got to be able to see this,
Oh, okay.
right? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? You could go and do some other things. You could drill holes on that and mount it there, and then you really wouldn't gain a quarter of an inch this
Oh, I
side
see.
with this particular router.
Okay.
Okay, there are other routers that might go deeper and not have this flat flange on it. I don't know, I haven't
Like if
experimented
you
on that.
used a Dremel, one of the small
Yeah.
Dremels.
Yeah, there's a lot of different possibilities you could do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, really, there's a lot of possibilities. You know, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go about doing
Now,
that.
how do you know that you've gotten 4 holes?
Because
on your
I went ahead
index?
and marked them.
You marked them on the spindle itself?
Yeah, I marked them right, I put a mark right here, and then put a mark right there. Okay, right on the headstock itself, so that when I get those marks lined up, I just kind of feel the hole drop, this point drops in the hole, and I can lock it down. That just saves me time, so I don't have to feel them as I count. This system right here, I don't like it as well as perhaps some of the other, what I've got at home, in that you've got a feel for those holes. On the 3520B, I've got the holes lined up at different places where I can look in there and I can see the holes as I turn it.
Okay, yeah,
So it's
that
a
would
little
be better.
easier. That's why for quickness purpose, in this case, I just marked them.
Uh-huh.
So it'd be quicker and simpler for me. Anyhow, you go ahead and finish up. And I could also, if I wanted to get a real clean pass, or if I was, the problem with cherry is it burns real easily, okay? So when you're routing, it's easy to burn. So if I was doing cherry, I might make 2 passes. One where I just start the cut and move it in, and then a last pass, if you will, that would come in maybe at a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch farther, and just kind of smooth right through it. That way I don't take a chance on staying in one spot too long and burning the cherry. I made those pedestal tables out of cherry, and it was a little bit of a hard task, a learning task not to burn it. So. Maple is not as bad about burning as the cherry is. So. So anyhow, it's not exactly wood turning, but it's a way of adding additional embellishment to it. And let's see, I think we have one more here. I've got safety glasses on doing this because this stuff will really make the shavings fly. I would suggest that even a face mask or a face shield would be a good idea. And essentially that's it.
Now, you put the masking tape on at the very beginning, Dan, so that you didn't chip
Well,
the
I'll show you.
square. Is that the idea?
The idea is that it's very easy, and see there was one chipped out. If nothing else, I can glue that right back down, and I've held it in place. But it's very easy when you're coming up against a square and you're rolling or doing anything with it to have this chip out and chip on the ends especially. So masking tape just holds it together. If you get a little piece that chips like that, you just glue it right back down and you're good to go. So anyhow, that is the jig. Really pretty simple. Here's again another.
What kind of wood did you say that was?
That's a soft maple, spalted maple. And anyhow, that's just another tool to use. You know, it's just something different to try. The little Colt routers, a small router like that, I think it's about $75 or something like that. It's not too bad. Cost a 1/4 inch by 4 inch by 1 foot long steel. I don't know, $10, $15 at Menards or whatever. Of course, that's just plywood I had laying around the shop, so just make up a couple gussets to give it support and drill and tap it. Biggest pain in the butt was drilling a 7/8 hole in steel. Getting that last drill to go through is pain. But it's really a pretty simple little tool. You know, they charge a whole bunch for those Fluke Masters and all that. But really, this will pretty much do the same thing, I think. You could do a big urn with that follower. You can follow the arc of the turning really easily. The only problem you've got is where you're going to bump into things at the end, as far as what your ratio and what your range can do. So that's it.
Very good, man.